What's up everybody, Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick and I have an album review for you. So one that I have been eagerly awaiting just because I absolutely loved their last album was the newest offering from Oceans of Slumber, Starlight and Ash. This also comes out on the 22nd of July on Century Media Records. This band formed in 2011 in Houston, Texas. This is their 5th album overall. Their last album, their self-titled album, was on my year-end list for 2020. I was absolutely fucking blown away by the album. I'd heard a lot of rumblings about this band, and I kind of got into them because I saw that their drummer, Dauber Beverly, was actually in Insect Warfare and currently also in Malignant Altar, and I was like, well, this guy's in a lot of good bands. Let's see what this one's about, and yeah, fucking blown away. So needless to say, I was pretty excited to go over this one, and this is a lot different than the last one and possibly a lot different than any of their previous albums. This is, debatable as to whether or not it's a metal album. Like, it definitely has heavier moments on it, but the overall vibe of this, the music itself does not necessarily scream metal, but yet I have really not much of a problem with it. Like, yeah, I love heavy stuff, and I do kind of miss the heavier aspects of this band, but what they do is absolutely amazing. Baseline, I guess what you could say is this is a prog metal / prog rock band, and this one sees them pushing into like a lot of different territory in terms of more clean melodies, in terms of the music itself, a lot more synth play and piano play, acoustic melodies. The drums are a little bit more subdued. Actually, I would say most of the heavier aspects are kind of dialed back in favor of melodic and emotional music, and the emotion is always captured with their amazing vocalist, Cami. She has such an amazing voice. She croons, she belts out giant choruses. I actually brought up their last one in a Gateway Albums for Non-Metalheads not too long ago, and someone actually said in the comments that she is metal's equivalent of Whitney Houston. And honestly, I have no arguments there because she has such a fantastic range. But the big thing is she emotes and she tells stories and you can relate to the lyrics, and that is kind of the whole vibe of this album. It's a very emotional journey. The verses are often the darkness, and then the choruses are the big triumphant shining light at the end of the tunnel. And I think that's true on their other works, but I think with the music being more subdued and her being even more upfront just because the music is a little bit softer this time. Like, there's not a lot of giant heavy guitars on here to really kind of match her power or, you know, maybe even drown it out. I don't think they could drown her out. She's fucking way too good. But overall, it gives a very different vibe to this album. The opening track, The Water's Rising, starts off very soft and subdued, and well, I was kind of waiting for it to get heavy, and it does get heavy, but much later on. Like, it takes a while to build up, but at the same time, it's very soothing. You kind of just let the song happen, and when it does get heavier, it's more of like a big rock heavy. Like, it just comes in, belts out this giant rocker chorus, which holy shit, those are all over here, and then gets a little bit more intense before it kind of just peters out a little bit. And that's a big thing on here, is building the song up and like the whole building tension and releasing it, but they're not necessarily releasing it in like a big metal way most of the time. It's more of like just a big epic crescendo that, I don't know, it goes in different directions. Songs like The Lighthouse, Salvation, Red Forest Roads have a more bluesy feel to them. Like, there's a little bit of that Texas blues mixed with a bit of R&B, and then just like kind of softer prog rock. And it's really cool as it does get heavier. Like, you can kind of just feel the mood completely shift. Like, these dark bluesy songs are very downtrodden. Like, there's a lot of like emotional outpouring in there, and I do like that. Like, the emotional connectivity on this album is great. It was great on all their other albums. I absolutely love that aspect of their sound. But when they build up these big crescendos, it's really interesting how they do it. Red Forest Road starts off with like somber, isolated, clean guitars and acoustic guitars, and it slowly sort of ramps up the energy, but it's a very, again, like downtrodden, almost kind of doomy vibe, and then it just explodes into much faster drums, much more intense guitar playing, though not necessarily like the most metallic riffs, but they're very heavy. And it's one of the few moments where you can hear Dauber really go off in terms of like the double bass play on here, because I think it's one of the few moments where he's just doing like a double bass stomp. Like, there's a couple other moments, but this one, it's a slower groove, kind of like a Morbid Angel fucking beat behind like a very, I don't know, bluesy Catatonia song. Very hard to describe, but it does really work well. And then Salvation opens up kind of like you're walking into a dimly lit, smoky bar in a David Lynch film. It's very dark, brooding. It's kind of a slow start. It kind of just wells up a lot of emotion because the subject matter, again, very dark, about reaching for salvation, and then the fucking chorus hits and it does reach for that salvation. Like, that's that sort of contrast I was talking about. The verses are telling you about all the fucking bullshit that's going on in your life, or just bullshit in general, and then the chorus is this great ray of light that shines down for a moment. But it's the end of the song. The end of the song, it's hard to describe. It's almost like Pink Floyd working with a Baptist choir and having like Whitney Houston come in and fucking sing some amazing shit on top of it. It is one of the biggest moments on here. The guitars get a little bit doomier, but again, not necessarily that heavy. Like, the guitar tone on here is, I don't know, like, it's more of rock heavy. Like, it's kind of a big, thick, fuzzy sound. It doesn't have like a big metal crunch to it. But when used to kind of raise up the song and get it a little bit more energetic, it still really works. And part of that might be due to a production change. The last album, they had Dan Swano do it, and it sounded fucking glorious. This time, it is Joel Hamilton, who I'm not particularly familiar with, but looking at his back catalog, he works with a lot of different bands. Like, he doesn't have the same roster of bands that Dan Swano works with. So I would say maybe he's not necessarily a flat-out metal producer. So that kind of makes sense, because this isn't necessarily a flat-out metal album, so they got kind of a different sound here. It's well mixed, it's very lush, and for what they were going for, it's really cool to kind of hear like all the isolated spots and sort of this emptiness that's there, but you know, it's like an emotional emptiness. It's a really cool sounding album in general, and I have to say the synths are maybe like even more prominent than before. They always seem to be busy on here, and they're not overused. I really like that, you know, they're doing different things to sort of accentuate the song. Hearts of Stone has this cool pulsating synth that kind of has like a nice 80s vibe to it. But you also have like piano sonnets in here for the more organic stuff when they're doing like more acoustic stuff and more like kind of Texas blues stuff. And I like how the production changed to suit the songs. The song The Hanging Tree kind of forgoes a lot of the more organic stuff with, again, the more Texas blues sort of sound, and kind of goes full bore 80s. Like, the drums get a little bit more washy. There's a bigger synth presence. It kind of has like a little bit of an 80s vibe, like a bluesier jam from like Prince, except with like Depeche Mode's Depression sort of sprinkled in there. Amazing chorus, which I can say about every song in here because the choruses are absolutely fucking gigantic. Like, this band knows how to write a hook. But it's the mood change and that production change. Like, it kind of gives this album a lot of variety, which there are some really interesting turns on here. This album really didn't get like flat out heavy until much later. And by flat out heavy, I mean heavy for this album, maybe not necessarily for their sound overall when you compare it to their other albums, but it does get heavier. Star Altar opens up maybe a little bit more heavy. Like, the guitars aren't very clean. They're a little bit more distant, a little bit chunkier. And this one has a little bit more intensity to it. Like, it's notably a bit heavier, but I mean, in comparison to like their other stuff, this song would be like the ballad on another album. But still, it was good to see a little bit more energy, or a little bit more like, I don't know if ferocity is the right word, but just like a little bit more heaviness to it. But Just a Day is, I would say, the crown jewel on here. The instrumental before it really sets it up well. You get these isolated pianos and Cammy singing over it, and it's just this very sort of bare bones approach. You can feel like the emptiness in the room and them just sort of like filling it with really good music. But oh my God, this song gets absolutely gigantic. It turns into almost a doom song, like very typo negative, like Paradise Lost. Like, it does get notably heavier, but it's that big, dreary, gothic vibe that I absolutely fucking loved on this song. It's the longest song, and I think they take so much time in terms of building it, because it is a steady build of intensity until the very end. Cammy's vocals continue to get more intense in the song. There's string sections that come in. It just gets fucking huge. It even ends in like a D beat. Like, it's probably one of the faster moments on here. And then it just slowly shrinks away, and honestly, it's the best song on here. I absolutely love this song. It's a great welling of emotion. I mean, like, there are parts in here, yeah, you can get kind of teary-eyed, especially like listening to the lyrics, because you kind of, you know, empathize with the storyteller, because this kind of has like a really good narrative to it. And it's propelled so damn well by the music. And it was definitely a thing on here where I think this album feels more tailor-made for Cammy's vocals. Like, honestly, like, you know, the death metal aspects that were in their earlier stuff, I really like that, but I don't know, like, sometimes she sounded a little bit out of place given her, like, very distinct vocals. This sounds like what her vocals were made for, and them just trying to figure out where to squeeze in the heavier moments. And while it lacks the ferocity of earlier albums, the emotional impact has not dulled one bit. And hell, they even do that with songs that aren't their own. There's an awesome cover of House of the Rising Sun on here, which it's absolutely awesome. It's done with mostly a violin and synths and then her. And it starts off with like the gentle plucking of the strings for the melody, and you hear like kind of a light Hammond organ behind her. And then you get like a really cool fiddle solo. And honestly, it captures the vibe of the song, but, you know, kind of takes its own spin on it. You know how like Five Finger Death Punch butt rocked that song up a while ago? This isn't that. This is a true, honest version of the song that comes from the heart rather than a fucking can of Monster and a fucking tin of Skull. Now, while I really, really like this album, and that's kind of a spoiler alert for the score, there are some issues I do have with it. One is this kind of feels like a push to one side pretty hard. Like, this is very different than anything else they've done in terms of like the heaviness. Like, the metal aspects are not entirely removed, but they are dialed down substantially. Like, this isn't like Opeth going from Watershed to Heritage. That one still kind of bugs me, but it's kind of comparable. Like, there's definitely been a lot of Opeth in their sound. There's definitely a lot of like The Gathering in their sound too. But this is definitely what I would call a transitional album. And while I love the music on here, it's absolutely amazing, it is missing a little bit of that extra heft. Like, it kind of takes a while to get to the heavier sections, but at the same time, you know, I like what I'm hearing. So I got this kind of torn vibe here. And there's only a couple songs in here that I wasn't into as much. The opening track, surprisingly, was one that I liked up until a point, because it built up this big crescendo and it feels like it was kind of moving into a totally different section and going to build from there again. But that became where it faded out. And I just feel like that was an incomplete song there. Like, there was more that could have been done, because where it fades out, I think, was a really cool section. It has this kind of like jazzy drum beat and, you know, more sultry vocals versus the big epic vocals that were before it. Like, I feel like this could have been like another 3 minutes long. And the instrumental, The Spring of 21, which is a piano sonnet, which I liked it. It's very pretty, but I was very distracted by the noise in the background. It sounds like maybe brushes on the drums, but they're so fucking faint. So I don't know if it's that, because if they are like brushes on a snare, why'd you mute them so much? Why the fuck are they even there? Maybe it was the piano bench creaking or something like that. I don't know. It was a bit of a distraction, and I liked the interlude. It was pleasant. It was a little bit long though. I felt like it could have been cut in half, but at the same time, I wouldn't know where to cut it because I liked every melody on it. But overall, while this is a different album for them, I really dig it. This is solid musicianship, great catchy songwriting, and it's missing some of the heavy, but I mean, what they replace it with is just more good stuff anyway. So overall, I'm gonna give this 4 stars. I don't know if I like it as much as the last one, but I've had way more time with that one, to be fair. But this is an excellent album. I love the songwriting. Cammie's vocals, I'm gonna labor that point because I think she's one of the best female vocalists out there. It's just so emotive, and it really just draws you into the songs. The musicianship in here is fantastic. Again, very different. There's a lot of different song building dynamics in terms of like releasing tension. Maybe it was like a challenge for them, like, hey, let's think of a different way to sort of like build up to these big crescendos, but maybe not in a metal way. I'd still say this is arguably a metal album, but it's definitely a lot softer. But again, it didn't really hurt it. The songs are what matters, and they are pretty much all gorgeous on here. If you're a fan of, again, I would say The Gathering, later Catatonia specifically, and maybe just giant fucking catchy songs that aren't necessarily super heavy. Like, if you're looking for a good break from heavier stuff that still has some emotional intensity behind it, definitely check this out. This is a fucking kick-ass album. So, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there'll be a link down below. There will also be a link down there to thrallsmetal.com where you can get one of our kick-ass shirts. And as for Denver Death Fest news, again, I think we have like maybe a couple more late entries that we're going over. I don't know. Like, again, this is more Miller and John's thing, but someone got a hold of us on our Instagram. I know that much, but I do know that it is happening September 30th through October 2nd in Denver, Colorado, because it's Denver Death Fest. And yeah, where else would it be? When we do eventually make the announcement of the lineup and everything, I'm sure there will probably come like ticket prices and whatnot, and we'll get on to that next step when we get there. We are definitely looking forward to seeing you guys there. Again, if you see us there, come up, say hi. Let's talk about some fucking weird shit and metal. But I don't know, weird shit's a lot of fun to talk about, so let's talk about some weird shit. Either way, we're looking forward to it, and of course, as always, thank you all so much for watching, subscribing, liking, commenting, all that stuff. Keeps us driven. It's amazing that this has gotten so fucking big. I don't know, like, I always look for something weird to say at the end, just in terms of being thankful. It kind of comes out the same awkward shit, but know that I mean it. And yeah, the awkwardness too, I definitely mean that. I really can't help it though. We love you guys. Thank you so much for everything you guys have done, and we will catch you later.